Join me, Harriet Gould, for the Lab Matters podcast to hear fascinating stories every week from the inspiring people behind the science. In this episode, fresh from the New Year's Honours list, I'm joined by the Chief Executive of the Royal Society of Chemistry, Dr. Helen Pain MBE. Hi, Helen. Helen, we are very lucky today. We've got Dr. Helen Pain MBE, CEO of the Royal Society of Chemistry, with us today. Helen's had a really exceptional career and no more so than receiving an MBE recently. We'll come on to that. But it didn't start there. So, Helen, hello. I wonder if you
Hi.
can take us back a little bit to where you started.
Gosh, Harriet, it's lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Gosh, where did it start? I guess it started right back when when I was at school. Do you know, I loved school, absolutely loved school. And I was really good when I was at school at maths. And for so much of my school days, that's what really inspired me until I had an exceptional chemistry teacher. And I met Dr. Sheila Cousins. She had a PhD from Imperial College. And when I went to my secondary school, I think she was a deputy head teacher and then she became head teacher, but she was also my chemistry teacher. And if it hadn't been for Dr. Cousins, I don't think I would have chosen a career in chemistry. And the real specific thing about Dr. Cousins was because she was a deputy head teacher and then a head teacher, it was her leadership qualities that really inspired me. And from probably from the age of about 12, that's who I decided I wanted to be like, not as a teacher, but doing the subject and doing the kind of science behind what I could see Dr. Cousins doing. So alongside my love of maths and all things logic and logic puzzles, I developed this kind of real love of chemistry. And I think that's what started it. That's what started my career that I've obviously continuing with today.
What was there a particular experiment or something that really captured your imagination at the time?
I think the thing with chemistry is it's all very much kind of hands-on. It's about doing things in a kind of practical setting. So it's a theory, and I was really drawn to the theory, but it was the mix of being able to understand through books and what you could visualize on the page, but actually being able to carry it out yourself. So I've always enjoyed doing things that are quite creative. I'm not necessarily very good at it in terms of, creative things or art or anything like that, but actually the ability to do things with your hands is really exciting. And that's what chemistry is all about. It's all about being able to do things kind of in situ and show show what's happening. And the things that change color and the things that make new compounds, the things that make new materials, and all of that kind of understanding how things work is what really kind of attracted me. So again, if it hadn't, I always wonder whether if Dr. Cousins happened to have been of kind of background in engineering or something, whether I would have followed that kind of path instead. But I'm so fortunate and so grateful that it was chemistry because that really has kind of been with me through my whole career.
That's marvelous. It sounds like you're really enriched by doing it. Um, so you had Dr. Cousins, but you had to leave Dr. Cousins and go on and further your
To
education.
further my education, of course I did. So I was at a very good kind of state school that I went to, and when I came to choose my A levels, I obviously chose to do chemistry. Interestingly, though, I think I initially thought about doing geography, but actually I decided that I didn't want to leave Dr. Cousins at that point, so I continued with my A level chemistry. And then when it came to choosing a university to go to, because, as I said at the beginning, it was really maths that was my subject. So I looked for courses that would combine the maths and the chemistry. And at that point in time, there were 4 or 5 universities across the UK that did a combined honours degree. And one of them happened to be Exeter, and I went down to Exeter, and I had some connection with the West Country. So I ended up doing my degree. Initially, I went to do maths physics and chemistry, but I soon discovered how difficult the maths was at university level, and decided that rather than split my time between two subjects, I would really focus on the thing that I really loved by that stage, partly because of the subject matter and the practical and the experiments and the ability to be in a lab, but also the people. I was just so kind of lucky that I had kind of found a community in chemistry that I just really kind of felt so connected to, and was really the thing that kind of drove me. And again, it's that community, the chemistry community, that has been with me since I decided to go to Exeter to do a degree.
That's, I mean, it sounds so lovely. It sounds almost like you've fall, fallen right in line with what you've been put on this planet to do. Um, there's never been any question. Apart from that geography, I'm curious, what made you consider geography?
What made me to consider geography? I think I was good at the subject, or at least I thought I was when I was doing my O levels. Interestingly, I think I did much better in chemistry than I did in geography. And I think the other thing about geography, it was still about understanding about the kind of, it was, the people aspect of it. And it was the kind of just kind of understanding how things work. And, there are some similarities, aren't there, across all those kind of subjects, whether it's the kind of sciences or the social sciences, about understanding how big systems work. And that probably was the thing that I enjoyed about geography at the time. But of course, in terms of how things work and systems in a different way is what you can experience through chemistry and studying chemistry.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Everything is connected in a certain way, and those sometimes those lines can be detrimental, but it's hard to know where to separate them and where to join them sometimes. So you're doing that. You're doing your undergrad at Exeter. Um, you obviously had some very good teachers there, some good lecturers, professors. Is there anyone that sticks out in your memory?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did my undergraduate degree in chemistry, and I was so fortunate that I had all of my lecturers were really attentive in the sense that they really cared about the students. So one of my undergraduate tutor in my first year was a professor, David Evans, and after I'd left Exeter, he moved to China. And in fact, David is still in China and is somebody that I work very closely with in terms of our kind of work in China now. But in particular, David has been phenomenal in his ability to put together outreach programs for many school children within China. And it's a fantastic example of where you can have one kind of interaction with an individual because of one part of your career. So as a tutor when I was in my first year, and then all these years later to work with somebody still connected through chemistry, but in a very different way. So I love the fact that I've got these kind of long-term connections with people. But the person when I was doing my degree, and then particularly when I was doing my PhD, who really was a role model and absolutely inspired me, was Professor Edward Abel. He was head of our department. He went on to have a senior role within the university as Provost Chancellor. And Ed then which was unbeknown to me at the time, actually, when I was in Exeter, had a very strong role within the Royal Society of Chemistry. And in fact, he became president of the RSC not long after I joined the organisation in 1994. But Ed was just so supportive and really put students first. And I think that was a huge, all credit to him and his, not only was he a phenomenal chemist and a phenomenal teacher, but it was the real kind of, he understood that he was, the the individual needs of the students that he worked with, and had a real interest in what they went on to do. And there's a number of us still in chemistry, in doing different roles in different places, who still have that, would credit Ed as being the person that kind of started them off in their careers and really inspired them. So I feel incredibly privileged and grateful that I had had the ability to work with and to know Ed for so many years.
It sounds like a terrific mentor. Um, so then you graduated. What came after that?
So obviously I graduated my first degree, carried on to do my PhD. Well, whilst I was doing my PhD, I think I did the thing that back in the early 90s that every student did, which was to go around the milk round interviews. So I interviewed for several roles across the big chemical companies and places like ICI and Crown Paints, and I think something through Mobil Oil or British Gas, and they were all, you went to all of these assessment centres to go onto a graduate program. But what became really clear to me during that period of time is that I was really inspired by, I think there's something around the business side of what I wanted to do, something around the leadership piece. But what became really apparent to me is what I wanted to do was work with the people. So it was the people aspect. And in fact, during I think the last year of my PhD, I even said to my supervisor when asked, what do you want to go on to do? I said I wanted to go to work for the Royal Society of Chemistry and organise conferences, because I realised I had a real I was really drawn to organising things and organising people and kind of working with people. And I think that by that stage, I had decided that I wouldn't necessarily want to continue in an academic career, and for a number of reasons. But so just as I was finishing my PhD, I opened New Scientist one day, and there was an advert for what was called the Younger Chemist Liaison Officer at the Royal Society of Chemistry. And I just looked at the advert and thought, that's my job. That's what I want to do. And I was very fortunate that in applying for it. I was interviewed and I was offered the role, and I haven't looked back since. So yeah, it felt like a very much a meant to be moment when I saw that job advert. But little did I know at that stage what I'd go on to do at the RSC, or that I'd spend my whole career working for the organisation.
Indeed. Good old New Scientist. Other magazines are available.
Yeah.
Uh, anyway, so tell me a bit more about doing your PhD. What did you do for a start?
So I was working in inorganic chemistry, doing specifically coordination chemistry. So I worked with a ligand called terpiridine, and I was looking at complexes of terpiridine with transition metals, and then creating novel compounds, and then studying looking at them under kind of different conditions, particularly using kind of variable temperature NMR to look at the kind of fluctionality. So terpiridine tends to form either bidentate or terdentate complexes. And we discovered something called the tick-tock mechanism, whereby it fluctuates from kind of two different forms, but in a tick-tock mechanism rather than a kind of rotational mechanism. In fact, if I look above my desk where I'm sitting currently, I've got a Molybod model of the terpiridine ligand, because I used it in a school talk recently just to explain what I was working on. And I think the fact that I was able to kind of work with, some amazing colleagues in the lab and identify this particular mechanism, that I could kind of say I was part of the naming of that, I was always kind of really proud of. And then I went then through that work, I was able to publish a few papers, particularly with the RSC. So again, I was very proud of that connection I had back then. So that's what I worked on. And I had the opportunity during my PhD, again, to be part of a community of other coordination chemists and working in similar areas. And again, many years later, one of our trustees, Ed Constable, worked in a similar area when I was doing my PhD. So it was, again, a really nice link back to having those very early connections with people in chemistry and being able to use those kind of relationships now as well. But yeah, so that's what my PhD, lots of time in the lab, lots of synthesis, lots of analytical techniques, lots of throwing lots of things together and seeing if it works. And that's what I love about inorganic chemistry. It's done on kind of scale, it's done with full color, and you get a chance to really try things out and see what works. And in 98% of the time, what doesn't work. And that's sometimes just exciting.
Indeed, it's good to rule things out. You didn't necessarily rule anything out while you were doing your PhD, as someone might have suggested, I understand. Is that right?
Yes, when I was doing my PhD, I remember one of my colleagues in the lab said to me one day, and I was very taken aback at the point because I didn't quite understand why the statement was made, but along the lines of, you've obviously decided not to get married and to have children. And I remembered at the time thinking, gosh, what is it I've said or done that would give anybody that impression? Um, and when I kind of queried it, or kind of obviously acted a little bit surprised, probably a bit taken aback, and probably a little bit offended, um, they went on to say, because you've chosen to do a PhD, so why would you spend time doing a PhD if you were planning to go on and get married and have children? And I don't think I thought any more of it, other than the fact that I knew that I was offended, and I knew that it did have a bit of an impact on me in terms of, maybe it kind of put a little bit of self-doubt in my mind about I wasn't good enough to go on and, in a kind of, either to get married or have children, or maybe, you know, wouldn't kind of follow that kind of path, or maybe also made me doubt about my commitment to chemistry and about my commitment beyond doing a PhD and going on to do any, postdoc, or to become work in academic research. But did you know, it was only years later that it really struck me about the how that comment was so kind of, partly, well, inappropriate, but also quite yeah, quite impactful on
Mm,
me. And I think because I've done so much work over the last few years, and thinking about research culture and about what's appropriate, and about how we need to encourage people to continue in academic research and to continue in the lab, that these comments are not acceptable, and to stereotype or to make statements of that nature that really do kind of, yeah, it's just not acceptable. So, but it is something that's come back to me in recent years.
and it didn't, luckily it didn't affect you at the time, and you've got a PhD, and you got married, and
And
you've
I
got
had children, yes. So, and I don't think that comment probably kind of changed my course of my, what I chose to do going forward. But yes, I can happily say that I'm married and have two children.
people. Are they interested in chemistry?
They are, actually. So I have two sons, both of whom are grown up now. My other son has recently graduated from his degree in chemistry, and my youngest son is just in his first year, studying geology. But in fact, his first year is he's doing geology and chemistry, so heavily kind of influenced and kind of involved in chemistry as well. But I think he'll go on to do to focus more on his geology as he completes his degree.
Mhm.
But I like to think I've had a little bit of influence there, but never had to help them with the homework. And that's what I was always very grateful. And they never came to me for help with homework or anything. So,
Fabulous. It's a chemistry dynasty you're creating here.
oh, maybe.
Um, so you said you did the milk round, applying for jobs, but then you found that one in New Scientist at the Royal Society of Chemistry. So were you straight there after doing your PhD, straight into the warm nest that
I
is?
was, yeah, absolutely. So I'd finished I remember writing up my PhD. I'd finished in the lab during the kind of summer of 1993. I was then writing up, and I submitted, I think, mid-November, but in the October is when I saw the advert, and I interviewed for the role. I remember beginning of December, and then I started on the 10th of January 1994. So almost to the day, 30 years ago, I started at the RSC. And I remember going for the interview, and it was in the same building where I continue to work now, in Cambridge on the Science Park. Um, and I remember sitting through the interview, and even at that stage, knowing that the fact that I'd done my PhD and my degree, and the connections I already made through that kind of my experience of chemistry were helping me in kind of securing that job. And that was really nice to know that I was getting the job because I had done a degree and PhD in chemistry. And in fact, that has always been a very strong theme throughout all the roles I've had, and my ability to connect with the people I work with now. So I always put it back to the fact that I certainly made the right decision in doing the degree in the first place.
You're here with me, Harriet Gould, for the Lab Matters podcast. If you like what you hear, please rate us on your favourite podcast platform. Do you remember who interviewed you?
I do, yes. So I was interviewed by a lady called Jane Sutton, and she was my very first boss. And Jane now works at the Royal Academy of Engineering. And in fact, just recently, she was in contact when I was awarded my MBE, and on LinkedIn I thanked Jane for giving me my very first role at the RSC, and I will always be grateful for Jane for giving me my first job. And she was a
Brilliant.
joy to work with, and absolutely. So I was, yeah, very, 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 very pleased that I had that opportunity.
Yeah, it sounds it. Um, so after that, tell us a little bit about that job and then some of the other jobs that you've had at the Royal Society of Chemistry.
So I probably would describe my career as quite linear, which I think is quite kind of different from many careers now. In fact, I was talking at an event last year, and somebody introduced this concept of a squiggly career, i.e., it goes off in all different directions. And I think mine is absolutely the opposite of that. It has been quite linear through the same organization, albeit the fact I've had many different roles with the RSC. So when I joined in 1994, as I mentioned earlier, I was the Younger Chemist Liaison Officer. And that sounds like a very fancy title. But what my job was to travel around the UK and Ireland recruiting student members to the RSC. So I genuinely thought I had the best job in the world because I could spend every day or virtually every day, certainly through term time, going to different university departments, often meeting people that I'd already knew through my degree or PhD or I'd met through conferences, and talking with students and talking to them about the benefits of being a member of the RSC, which are very many benefits in terms of, careers guidance, careers advice, support, funding, and connections, and all the other things that we continue to do now. Um, and there was a real sense of achievement, not least because of visiting. And I think my first year I visited 65 chemistry departments. And before there were sat navs and before there were mobile phones, that in itself was an achievement because I was navigating all these different city centres and all these different campuses. Um, but through that, you meet so many people. And again, one of the great things now is that I'm still in contact with the people that I recruited in those first couple of years at the RSC, or that were the program leads or program directors at the university. So we still have that kind of that link. So I think there are some of our members and in our community who will have met me first time when I joined the RSC, and have probably literally seen me grow through the organization. And that's a nice thing to always to be aware of. But having done that job for a couple of years, my job really just then evolved and grew. And so I took on more recruitment and responsibility for the whole of our membership, so not just student members, but other categories of membership. I started to introduce the work around kind of marketing and marketing principles. So I took myself off to evening class to do a qualification in marketing. At that point, nobody at the RSC outside of the publishing activity had a kind of marketing background or even a communications background. And so I wanted to kind of establish some of that that kind of capability. So I did it through evening classes and brought that back into the organization, which again has helped me continue to do what I do now, to have an understanding of customers and understanding of how to reach out to different audience groups. And then through other roles that I've had, I got more involved in our conferences, in our events, in our networks, in our Chemist Community Fund, which previously was called the Benevolent Fund. And I still, one of my proudest achievements at the RSC has been working with the Chemist Community Fund. It is just a phenomenal opportunity to support people in our community at times of needs. And we have an amazing team doing that now. And there is a true commitment and passion from the individuals who work with the fund to really help and support members of our community who, in times of real need, find that support and that opportunity to really, have life-changing kind of moments. And, that continues to be a really kind of important connection that I have. And again, I think back to the time when I managed the Chemist Community Fund or the Benevolent Fund, I feel very proud of what we do and what we've continued to do.
Mhm. It is a really good it is a really good initiative. There's no doubt about that. Um, So you really had established yourself and positioned yourself really well. I wonder, did you ever plan to be the CEO? How, how did the opportunity come about? Because of course, I mean, our previous CEO was here for a very long time.
That's right. Robert Parker, who I owe a huge amount to, and I'd worked for Robert since he became chief executive back in 2011. But like me, Robert's whole career has been spent with the RSC, and I think when he retired a couple of years ago, had been, I think, 35 years with the organisation. So I learned a lot from Robert, and also the chief executives who went before Robert. So, having been here 30 years, I've worked with probably three or four chief executives, and also many others. And the interesting thing is actually I've only worked at the RSC, I think, for three or four managers, partly because when I joined, the organisation was just entering that kind of growth phase, and I've always been on the kind of that leading edge of that growth. And so as the organisation grew, my role was able to grow, and I probably created opportunities for myself, but I also took the opportunity because of things around me changing, to do many more and different things. But I had the advantage of, because of the nature of my role, that I was able to work with, successive CEOs over the years. And I think there probably was a point in my first, I don't think it was from the time I started at the RSC. I didn't, have an aspiration to be CEO. I think I always had something about the leadership thing. That takes me back to when I was really inspired by Dr. Cousins at school because of her leadership role and the fact that she was the head teacher. So I think there was always something about what could I do, how far could I, achieve in an organization, what could I do that would really play to my strengths, but something that really excited me, and I really, really got a lot of joy from, and also a lot of kind of confidence from. But there probably was a point after I'd been with the organisation about 15 years when I thought maybe that is a role I could do. But what can I learn? What would I have to do? And I've always set myself quite long-term goals, and felt that if you have a long-term goal, so yeah, absolutely short-term things, but if you have a real long-term goal and aspiration, and you just keep focused on that, what can you achieve, and therefore what decisions do you have to make along the way. So for example, what additional training might you volunteer for, what voluntary work might you choose to do, in knowing that I had worked at the RSC for my whole career, and if I did aspire to a very senior leadership role, there was a point when I thought I ought to get some experience outside of the RSC, and it's at that point I started to do kind of trustee work and volunteer first of all as a school governor, and then with other charities, so that I could gain some external experience alongside the RSC experience. And I know that stood me in very good stead when it came to finally applying for the role of CEO. So I guess if I had to be kind of honest with myself, I think I had a kind of, yeah, I had an aspiration, from, yeah, for very many years before I became CEO.
I think that's comforting to know. It's nice to think that someone's had a vision and is fulfilling it rather than just it something happening on a whim because an opportunity arose. I think that's nice.
I like to think I made some of it happen,
Yeah,
that I was in control of my
absolutely.
future.
It certainly sounds like you were, for sure. Um, so when it actually happened, how did you feel? Was it like, wow, I've arrived, or right, now I can really get to work?
What, when I became CEO?
Yeah.
Um, I think it was, I mean, I had a kind of I had a very drawn out experience becoming chief executive. And I say that because in 2015, I became a deputy chief executive, with Robert as CEO. And then in beginning of 2020, Robert took some time out, and I was appointed as an acting CEO. And then the pandemic hit, so I became acting CEO, I think on the 16th of January 2020. And I think within 2 weeks, we had learned from our colleagues in China that there was this thing happening, and that might have a big impact on what was to come. And of course, that's exactly what panned out with the pandemic. And because of that year of change at the RSC, we all work differently, everybody worked differently. And because of the context we were going through, I think when we came to the end of that year, when Robert was due to come back into the role of CEO, lots had changed. And I think at that point, when Robert took the decision to move into a slightly different role, at which point I became the interim CEO because of course, the trustees would need to go through a full recruitment process to appoint the permanent CEO. So I was interim CEO whilst they were doing the recruitment for chief executive. And I went through a full and thorough interview and recruitment process, which took about 4 months. And then I was appointed in June 2021, I think. So I went from being deputy to acting to interim and then to CEO. So by the time I'd done that, I really felt there wasn't, for me, it was like a continuation. I'd already put in place what I wanted to do in terms of our strategy, what I wanted to do kind of going forward. So there was never a point where it was a kind of I've stopped one job and I've started another job. And in fact, that's what I'd say about my whole career. One job has kind of moved into the next. So it's been quite kind of there has been a real continuum of things. So, but having said that, the day that I was offered the role of CEO, I felt incredibly proud. And I just thought, this is amazing.
And
I still
how
feel
did
very, very lucky.
it does. I mean, I can imagine, and I wonder how that feeling of pride compares to being recognized on the New Year's Honours List.
Do I think it's a similar kind, well, it is the same pride actually, because it's still connected to the amazing work of our community and of my colleagues and all the people I've worked with. So, I achieved the role of CEO through the work that I'd done with many, many different people over the years. The opportunity to work with the Science Council, the opportunity to work with the Technician Commitment, where I'm chair of the steering board, the opportunity to do work, with many different organisations, many different stakeholders, and that really helped me when I, became chief executive. But that was very much focused on the RSC part. I think what was what I felt really kind of privileged about and extremely honoured by when I got the letter about being an MBE or being made an MBE was the fact that it was kind of recognising my work and across the whole kind of science community. And again, it's that community piece which really matters to me. And the connection of all the different parts of the science community and how that comes together to really make a sector that is so strong and has so much kind of opportunity to do such great things. So it was a kind of reinforcement of the pride that I felt when I got the CEO role, but a kind of almost because it's recognition that's coming from so many different kind of parts of the work that I've done. Yeah, it was amazing.
Mhm. It must be.
I had to
Congratulations.
read the letter many times to convince myself it was real.
When do you get your award?
At some point during kind of the early part of this year. So I know they're going to be in contact, and the opportunity to go and receive it. So which will be amazing.
That would be wonderful. Yeah, really congratulations. I think
Thank
that
you.
a
Thank
lot
you.
of people would like to say congratulations to you for that one. Um, and I guess before we end, the first thing, the last thing, in fact, that I would like to ask you is what's next? What's next for you? What's next for your work outside and inside the RSC? What's next for the future of science and of chemistry?
Gosh, well, future chemistry is, that there is so much potential opportunity for chemistry to really continue to make a difference. And through the RSC, our whole purpose is about helping the chemical science community make the world a better place, and absolute commitment to that, whether that's through kind of sustainability or through our inclusion and diversity work. Through supporting our community, through ensuring that the discipline continues to strengthen, continues to be funded, ensuring that we advocate on behalf of the subject, but also in terms of influencing policy, and also ensuring that there are future chemical scientists through influencing and inspiring all those children coming through school, supporting the teachers that they can then teach and inspire themselves and be the role models for future generation. So there is so much work to continue doing, so much impact to continue achieving. Um, I'm really proud of where we are currently at the RSC. I know there's lots of change across the chemical science sector. There is a lot of change across the publishing sector, the way that research is done. Um, we need to continue to be part of that. And I always say, from an RSC perspective, there are many things that we will lead in, there are many things that we will partner in, and there are many things that we will support. And it's about making sure that we play to our strengths and we play the role and the important role that we play alongside all the other disciplines and the others, individuals, people's roles, professions that make up the science profession as a whole. For me, having said I've just celebrated 30 years at the RSC, I'm absolutely focused on what does the next 5 years, next 10 years look like. So yeah, I've got to set my next kind of 5 years goal, 5 years of challenge. What do I want to achieve in that time? But equally, what do I want to help others achieve? Because I do realise that I'm in a very fortunate position to be able to support and mentor and hopefully to some maybe be a role model for the future chief executive of the Royal Society of Chemistry. So going back to the important role that Robert has played in my career. I know that when Robert stepped down as CEO, um, he the fact that he had really helped with succession planning for the RSC in support of me, but also in the support of many others as well. I want to make sure that when it comes my turn to leave the RSC, that I have left the organisation in a equally strong position. So succession planning, I think, is really important.
It's as though you're Prime Minister, Helen. I
Prime
like it.
Minister.
Yeah.
Now that's a role I hadn't considered. So
Maybe that can be your 10-year plan.
or maybe not, Harriet. Maybe not.
Okay, maybe not. I hope Dr. Cousins knows how much she inspired you. That's all
Well, I
I have.
know that I was in contact with her several years ago because I wrote to her I think when I became director of membership actually at the RSC. So unfortunately, I think Dr. Cousins has passed away now, but yeah, I certainly wrote to her to let her know
Yeah.
the role that I had. So and to thank her because actually, I will keep saying that if it hadn't been for Dr. Cousins when I was at school, I do wonder what I would be doing now.
Mm. Well, luckily for us, we don't have to wonder. Thank you so much, Helen. It's been a real joy talking to you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Harriet.